Hey Siri, open the blinds. What's up guys, this is Steve. In this video, we're going to talk about how I built the blind system that you just saw before. It's a HomeKit-enabled motorized blinds that control both of my blinds in my windows. So recently I moved into a new apartment. It's a really nice space, very spacious, but it was becoming a castle for me to actually open and close the blinds every day. So I decided to integrate that into my HomeKit. So I have my HomePod over there, I've got a smart lamp and stuff. So I thought it would be nice to be able to control my blinds with either voice commands or my phone, or even like a scheduled event like opening the blinds every morning to wake me up. So yeah, that's why I started doing this project. And at the beginning I bought a ESP32 chip and also some stepper motors from Amazon. And those motors are super cheap. They're like $10 for 5 of them or something. In case you don't know, a stepper motor is like a motor, but it only goes in increments. So unlike a conventional motor, which just keeps accelerating and decelerating, a stepper motor only goes in certain steps, and therefore it can have precise control over the location of the motor, the position of it, basically. So because I need to control the position of the blind, I thought the stepper motor was a good, it's a good application for it. So at first, I just grabbed a bottle of ibuprofen, which is a lifesaver for a college kid like me. I dumped out the contents and drew some holes, attached the shoelace, and tied it to the strings on my blind. It's super jank, and it didn't work at all because the stepper motors didn't have nearly enough torque to drive this setup. So I realized that like I can decrease the torque that the strings of the blinds are exerting on the motor by decreasing the radius of the spool, if that makes any sense, because torque is just the radius times the force. So I ditched the bottle, I just used the cap as a spool, and I drilled some holes and took out my sewing kit, which thanks mom for insisting that I bring it to here even though I thought I'd never use it, but here I am. So I used those strings and tied them to a very low radius, super close to the axle of the motor. And yeah, it was working kind of, but it's very messy because the string doesn't have a proper spool to wind onto. So that's when I got into CAD. It's 3D printing time. I used Fusion 360 to design the spool and I printed it out, and it looks like this. And yeah, and another big part of this project is having to mount the motors, because I mean Newton's third law, right? Like the motor's output force is only as good as the force that you can use to hold down the motor. And since this is a leased apartment, I didn't dare to drill any holes in the wall, and I had to think of other options for mounting the motors. So what I realized that is my bed frame is like a rectangle on the side, so I can put something that goes up, clamps in between, and then because there's a hole, a circular hole in the middle of the rectangle, I can plug something in the hole, and therefore forming a closed loop that wraps basically around the bed frame's metal. So that was my idea, and I CAD'd it, 3D printed it, and this is what it looks like. So I wrote some code to make the motor continually go straight, keeps like spinning, and it works. As you can see, it can close and open the blinds. So this is when I learned my first valuable lesson in electronics. It's my first time, I've never had any experience. So I just plugged my motor directly to the 5 volts output of my ESP32 board. And it was working fine. Again, you can see that it works. However, when I started running my code for HomeKit, my code actually establishes a connection between my phone and the ESP32. It wasn't working with the motor for some reason. And I can only assume that it's because the motor is taking too much electricity, the current is fluctuating so much because the motor has inductors, it has things like that, that it was kind of tampering with logic circuits on the device, on the ESP32. So it wasn't working, and yeah, I was devastated. So I went online and did a lot more research. And during this time, I came onto a video that was super helpful for this, and I'll link it in the description down below. So he basically explained how he did his setup. I'm not doing the same way as he did, but I used his ideas for the circuits to be able to power my motor separately. So I bought a bunch of stuff, bought some wall plug, some AC/DC adapter, and other circuit stuff, and I was able to hook up my motor to a different controller which accepts 12 volts. And the controller also, I have to modify my motor to be bipolar instead of unipolar. So I did all of this, and this has the effect of not only powering the motor separately, which enables my chip to function as intended, but it also makes the motor go a lot harder because more voltage is just more power. And I'm driving this motor on 12 volts instead of 5 volts, which was before. So yeah, it's got a lot more torque. After I got this all done, it was working. So it was working on my blind. Not only on the small blind you saw before, but also on the bigger blind, which if I used the previous 5 volt circuit, it would not have been enough. It would not have had enough torque. So yeah, I also designed a mount for my piano stand. So I don't have my bed next to this big window, but I did see that I have a piano stand here which has enough weight to actually hold the motor down. This is my second iteration of the clamp. The first iteration was kind of flimsy and it broke in the end, but the second one is able to clamp pretty hard on this stand. And that's it. After the two motor system is set up, all I had to do was connect them together and then write my code to control them. To do this, I went into the engineering building and took like 17 meters of wires. They were kind of reluctant to let me do it, but like they said, okay, you need it, so you can take them. So I took those wires and then connected them together. So yeah, and then this project is complete. And it's honestly took me so much time, took me a whole month to do. But I learned a lot in this process. I learned to solder and learned to 3D print, and I learned about like, all the labs on campus that's able to help me with 3D printing and soldering. And it was a really fun project. And I love being able to automate my blind with my voice. I love being able to be woken up in the morning by my blinds opening up. So in the end, it was a very fun project, and I'm super glad I embarked on it. I've always wanted to be an engineer. I ended up as a computer scientist because it's more accessible, it's easier to get a job, but honestly, engineering is still very fun. And yeah, I would recommend you to go out there and just buy some Arduino stuff and try building cool shit yourself. And yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching.